Breaking Limitations Show with our host, Joyce Marendes. We are here to empower, equip, and promote. Let us discover your superpower.
Represent your commitment to breaking limitations by visiting breakinglimitationsnow.com to purchase your Breaking Limitations t-shirt, tank top, or hoodie today. What limitation are you holding on to? The Breaking Limitations Mindset Journal has 63 daily quotes and scriptures that will help you break every limitation in your life. Get your copy today.
Hi, and welcome to the Breaking Limitations Show. My name is Joyce Marendes, and I am your host here on today. As you all know, our mission is always to empower, to equip, and to promote individuals who've been able to overcome great obstacles in their lives and discover their own superpower. Today, I'm excited to be able to have one of our special guests. His name is Michael Bociurkiw here in the studio on today. And Michael is an author of Digital Pandemic COVID-19, How Tech Went from Bad to Good. The book was written from the perspective gleaned from several decades on the front lines, humanitarian emergencies and breaking news. He is a former spokesman for UNICEF and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Currently, Bociurkiw is a global affair analyst, regular contributor to CNN Opinion, and a frequent commentator on BBC, World Television, CNN, Al Jazeera, and Bloomberg Television. Previously, he has worked as a staff reporter for the South China Morning Post and Asia Times, and his opinion and reporting has been published in Forbes, Los Angeles Times, and by MSNBC. Welcome to the Breaking Limitations Show.
Thank you for having me, and I salute you for everything you do and for your show and the wonderful guests that have come before me in the goal to empower women. You've been doing a fantastic job, so thank you.
Thank you so much. I know it's been hard to get you here, but I'm so glad that we finally managed to have you here. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And so I'm really excited that you're here and to talk about your book, Digital Pandemic, because when I read it as a woman, as a parent, I have my copy right here. Yes, when I read it, I realized there are so many things going on about technology that I didn't know even existed. And so I wanted you to come here and just talk to us a little bit about that, your thought process, and then so that we can be able to just empower even all the people out there who watch the Breaking Limitations show.
Well, I guess all of my life, Joyce, I've been telling stories ever since I was a little kid. When I was exercising yesterday, I don't know why these thoughts come to my mind. Maybe it's COVID brain, but I remember when I was little, I used to get in trouble because I used to write, like, for example, if Christmas was coming up, I used to write about, the birth of Jesus or something like that, and then post it with glue on my bedroom door. So you can imagine the scolding I got from my parents then, but, it didn't deter me maybe it even helped me because, as you go along, become a journalist, you get turned down by editors or by publications, by book publishers, even. So you have to be resilient and persistent. That's a big message I'd like to put out to folks out there. Being resilient and persistent. Whenever anyone says no to you, say yes. And in fact, not many people know this story, but I always thought I'd apply to take journalism in school. And when I applied, my father was a university professor in Ottawa, Canada. So we had free tuition, but there was no free pass in terms of getting into school. But I was actually turned down for journalism school.
Oh, wow.
At my father's university. It was a big blow, but I was told my marks weren't good enough. So I thought, okay, so what do we do now? Do I become a street kid, gang member? Just kidding. So I said, okay, well, I'll take the next best thing, mass communication, which is basically the theory of media. It gives you a very good ethical background in, communications and journalism. You study all different kinds of disciplines. So actually, it prepared me a lot better for the journalism career. The other thing I did, and this is also, I think, a lesson learned for others, is I volunteered, for example, at our campus radio station. I became a producer. That show eventually became the best public affairs show in the entire campus radio station. And that's where I learned the nitty gritty of doing, kind of reporting. I worked at a community newspaper in Jersey City. And then I, like many of us, I got my big break one day and really got catapulted. But the main thing back then, because, when you're starting out young, you're vulnerable, you feel vulnerable. As I said, people say no, they slam the door in your face. So I had a very good mentor, Victor Malarick. He's Canada's top investigative journalist, the author of many books. He was recently a guest on my own podcast and podcast with Melissa Ritchie, Global Impact. But he's the one who said, no, don't take no for an answer. Always go for the best. And he's stayed with me through the decades, not the years, the decades, and is part of the reason why I'm here today. And I also have Michael and Natalie, two other mentors in New York City and Wall Street. So it's really, really important to, again, be persistent. Don't take no for an answer. To have mentors behind you who are going to push you and help open doors for you. And then also very, very important to have a very, very good network. I know you and I are friends with people who have big networks, and you probably do too, as well as I do. So there are always people there. And then, a simple thing is when you're ending a conversation with somebody or you're ending an email to someone important, always end with, is there anything I can do for you? This is something my mentors, Michael and Natalie, taught me because they go to so many big conferences with big names. When they're at a cocktail reception or whatever, they can go up to someone, a corporate CEO or even a Mark Zuckerberg, some Bill Gates, somebody like that. And, people always need help. People, no matter how high up they are, they have problems which can't be solved by their own teams. And maybe you can. So that's why that's a good lesson learned, is to, offer your help, and you never know what might result to that. But anyway, just to finish up on my story. So I did start out in journalism and had very, very fulfilling years, a lot of those in Asia and Hong Kong. I was a member of the startup team of two newspapers. And then fate kind of brought me back to where I am now, the Pacific Northwest. I'm on the Canadian side of the US border, just north of Seattle. But after 9/11, of course, it looked like the world was falling apart. And indeed, in many parts of the world, not only the US, it was falling apart. So I got a call out of the blue from a friend, again, pointing to the importance of having a network. My friend Ian, and several time zones away, he goes, hey, I'm in Central Asia and I've just been talking to UNICEF, and they need a few people urgently to come work on the Afghanistan emergency, because remember at that time the Taliban had fallen and in the northern part of Afghanistan, the Northern Alliance were back in control, but there was a huge humanitarian crisis. And he said, how would you like to become a UNICEF communications consultant? I go, yeah, sure, why not? So I said yes, and that catapulted me in a career of more than a decade of humanitarian work, working mostly for UNICEF, but also the World Health Organization, Pan American Health Organization. I was my first staff position with UNICEF was in arguably their most difficult position as a communications person. That was in East Jerusalem, working on the Palestinian side of the line, where day after day, lots of violence, lots of violations of human rights, especially against women and children. And whatever you said, would often be taken the wrong way or not received well by either the Palestinian or the Israeli side. So boy, did I ever earn my training wheels early in that particular career. And I worked in several emergencies, the big earthquake in Pakistan, the cyclone in Myanmar, a few others. And then kind of coming up to more recent years in 2014, when Russia illegally annexed Crimea and their Russian-backed fighters invaded Eastern Ukraine, I was asked by my government, Canada, to be seconded to something called the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. It's the biggest regional security body in the world, kind of a mini UN, if you will, or mini NATO for Europe. And that was to be their spokesperson in Ukraine. And Ukraine is my homeland. That's where my parents were born. Us brats were born here in Canada, but we were raised in a very Ukrainian culture and speaking Ukrainian. So it was a very natural fit for me. But within 3 months of arriving in Ukraine to take up this position, we had 2 kidnappings of our staff, and then had that crash of Malaysian Airlines MH17 in Eastern Ukraine in July of 2014, where 298 souls were lost. And we were one of the first international observers. Actually, we were the first international observers on the scene there. And yeah, it was very, very, very difficult, but I kind of became, and my team, kind of the de facto spokespersons for that whole crash, communicating to the world what we were seeing and what was being done. I don't think I've ever was under such pressure and stress, but I think God's hand works in mysterious and invisible ways, and I was there for a reason. I knew it, and I felt it right away because I'm of Ukrainian origin. We were on Ukrainian soil, occupied, but on Ukrainian soil. I used to cover aviation as a journalist. I used to cover Malaysia. So it was just an incredible convergence of threads kind of in my life that came together. And it's something that I'll never forget. And I've actually become quite attached to the issue. I advocate a lot for justice, which hasn't been served yet. And I've become friends with actually families of the victims. So it's something that's going to be with me till the day I die. And then after that, I decided I kind of, you're a spokesperson for so long, you're telling other people's stories, you're advocating on behalf of others. So I thought I really want to go back to my core profession, and that was journalism, but more commentary. So I started writing opinion pieces, and CNN Opinion kind of became the first home for me, if you will. I'm a regular contributor there now, and they've actually played a big role, the staff there who are wonderful, to make me a better writer. Their fact checking is rigorous. They're kind of work with you to make you a better writer. What do you mean by this? Or you said this, but you wrote this. So, and that's why I recognize them in the book Digital Pandemic. So this book is something which has its roots pre-pandemic, really, because in the lead up to the pandemic, I'm a Libra, that's a procrastinator, professional procrastinator. I had been working for a long time on a book called Digital Crack, which was on smartphone and social media addiction. And, went to it, then put it off, went to it, put it off. Then I said, okay, I'm going to go to Portugal I had a great friend there who set me up with a remote, almost as remote as you can get, a little cottage. And there's nothing much to do there but write. So the writing actually started to go very well. That was late 2013, late 2019, early 2020. And then, of course, the pandemic hits. And our Prime Minister Trudeau said, all Canadians, come home now. And a lot of us, wherever we lived in the world, there were a lot of Canadians scattered around the world, took his advice very seriously. And I'm glad we did, because we had no idea at that time where this pandemic would go. So I temporarily suspended writing on the book. But then I came here, and even before in Portugal, I was already accredited for the WHO biweekly press conferences. I had covered the SARS outbreak in Asia. I had worked for WHO, as I said, UNICEF. So I've covered polio outbreaks, I've covered measles outbreaks. So I was very intimately kind of tied into this pandemic issue. So, you know, I told myself, let's dive into this. So I took some of the book I was working on technology and married it with the topic of the pandemic. And basically, well, I know we're going to get into the book, but that's how this book came about. So that's where we are now. Make a long story short. And right now, as we speak, what I'm doing with you is also talking a lot about the book and promoting it.
Wow, that is so awesome. I love how you say that it's so important to be persistent with your dream, because I think sometimes we just think that if something doesn't work the first time, then we don't pursue it, or maybe this is not God's will for me to do this. But just hearing your story makes us realize how important it is for us, and even to teach other people, like our kids and everything. Just pursue, be persistent with what you're trying to achieve. And then also it shows that no experience is ever wasted, because all the different experiences that you got from all the different things that you did now have come together, and you're able to use all that experience to make you be able to be who you are right now. So I'm really excited to hear that. So
indeed. And just quickly, you know, because people helped me along the way, I feel naturally, you know, that I'm in a role to help other people. So I do have people who I mentor as well. And just quickly, I'm part of something called the Op-Ed Project in New York City. And they help mostly women, actually, starting out, who want to write opinion pieces. We mentor them and we help them get it published, because if you appear in the opinion pages of major newspapers, it's often a springboard to something bigger, maybe a board membership on a corporation, things like that. So it's really, I've been doing it for a number of years, and it's really, really fulfilling.
oh wow, that's awesome. That's so good to know, because I know a lot of people who are writing or trying to pursue their careers and everything, and it's just good to know about that mentorship programs and all that. So that is awesome. Yeah, so I want us to get into the book.
Right.
Yes. So I know that for those of you who haven't gotten this book, this is a really good book to have. And so one of the things that you actually have it here on the back of the cover, it says that if COVID-19 pandemic response were an exam, many world leaders would have to cheat on their finals to obtain a passing grade. You know, that in itself makes someone want to buy the book. They're like, okay, what exactly do you mean by that? So could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, well, by the way, this book was, because of COVID, it was produced entirely virtually. I had the beautiful book cover, which is a adaptation of that COVID icon that we're all so familiar with. But that was done by a graphic artist in New Zealand. The book was edited by a chap called Nathan Smith in New Zealand. The inside design was made by a chap 30 kilometers away from me who I've never met in person. It was fact-checked or proofread by people, good friends around the world. So it goes to show you how we can do things in this day and age. But yeah, we, as a team, we debated what to put on the back cover, and we went over a few quotes. And this one, which was from one of my CNN opinion pieces, I believe, really stuck out. And it gets a lot of laughs, but then it makes people pause and go, that's right. But look, no one was really prepared for this pandemic. But having said that, the warnings were there. The warnings were stark from everyone from Bill Gates to many other prominent people who should have been listened to. But the signals were ignored. There was very, very little preparedness, very little stockpiling of PPE, ventilators. We knew this was coming. Any politician who tells you that I had no idea we'd get a pandemic like this, well, he or she is probably lying, because all the signs were there. Having said that, to become a politician these days, sometimes people do very little campaigning, sometimes they do a lot, but there's no kind of training per se to become a good politician. It takes a lot of different skills to come together. And there were some leaders who did very well and some who didn't. So in the book, I single out a few of them, but there are a few standouts there. Among them is, of course, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who did a tough but wonderful job of locking down the country. And I mean locking it down completely. And they beat the virus down very quickly. The other one is the president of Taiwan, another female, who with very, very little help, it should be said, of the international community, did what it took to control the pandemic there. They basically set the gold standard. And because they're not a full member of the UN or of WHO, because they're viewed by China as a rogue state that needs to come back into the Chinese fold, that China, Beijing blocks them from a lot of assistance and international participation. But even with that, they did very well. Another one is the Premier of New South Wales in Australia, a female who did fantastic public messaging. So, I remember from my career in UNICEF, we did a lot of studies on what works and what doesn't. And one of the things the data showed definitively, I think you'll like this and a lot of your viewers, is that oftentimes women make better leaders than men. Why? Is because oftentimes the decisions they make, not only are they more consultative, but their decisions tend to be much more family friendly or children friendly. So their decisions or their policies are much more impactful. So hopefully we will see more female leaders, not only in the public sphere, but also corporate sphere as well. But yeah, there were so many leaders that were either tone deaf. For example, I used the subtitle rules. Let's get this right. Rules for thee, but not for me. You'll remember, because you're based in Texas, I won't name him, but everyone knows what I'm talking about. The senator from Texas who, not only did you have the pandemic, but you had that terrible weather, that storm, and telling everyone to stay home, be careful, and then he takes off to Cancun with his family before he's caught. So many other stories like that around the world of leaders, even our own Prime Minister Trudeau saying, yeah, stay at home, it's Christmas, Thanksgiving, we don't want to super spread this virus, and then they go off and they're caught. So that goes into why there's so much cynicism of our leaders. And sadly, it's also why I think a lot of people don't believe a lot of the advice they give, because why? They've broken the public trust. So that's why I really wanted to highlight that particular remark. Now, we're still very, very much, sad to say, far away from the end of this pandemic. It seems that whenever there's a small crack or gap, this is a vigorous virus that likes to exploit those gaps. So you can't turn your back on this thing. It seems to almost outsmart us at every turn, and that actually worries me. So yeah, I talk a lot about, also in the book, hence the title, is how despite some of the weaknesses and vulnerabilities I've just touched upon, is that technology helped us make it through a lot of this pandemic. We saw how people were using social media, not only to, of course, stay informed, but also to tell tale politicians or whoever were violating the public trust. So that was actually a fun part of the book to write about, a little bit sad, but also fun. And I could probably have done a whole book on stories like that, you know?
Wow, but that is so true what you said. The social media, this whole pandemic, it allowed us to get information, but sometimes we've been getting information through social media, but that information, sometimes it's not verified or it's not true. So can you talk a little bit about that? How, because I know we've talked about how the digital world, it can be good and it can also be bad. So when it comes to getting information that's not verified, but then it spreads like wildfire and then it can't be contained. So people are also confused how, like, what is true, what's not true.
Right. Okay, well, first of all, if I can, so yeah, the subtitle, as you pointed out, is How Tech Went from Bad to Good. So I'm not saying that big tech is entirely good. There are bad aspects, the social media and smartphone addiction. But of course, the technology helped us to power through this pandemic. A lot of people leaned into digital media, allowed us to work from home, allowed us to shop and buy from home. Telehealth, because a lot of people were afraid to go to the doctor's offices or to the hospitals, even if they were open. Distance learning, huge thing. And a lot of these things, like overnight, we went from being in a classroom to being at home and learning, although there were a lot of difficulties there. We went from working in the office, to working at home. You would know, you're a mom. And
yes,
you know, the technology was there, the infrastructure was there, but the preparedness, as I said, was not there. So a lot of teachers, a lot of moms, a lot of parents were thrown into this. The other thing I'll just mention, because you know you have, I think, quite a big female audience, is I referenced something in the book called the she session. You know, it's off the word recession. And what happened when the pandemic, in the lead up to the pandemic, what was happening, the economic trends were that a lot of females were going into what we call front-facing positions, you know, airline check-in clerks, flight attendants, hospitality sector, tourism sector. These were all positions that, by its nature, you work very closely with the public. And these were exactly the same positions that were all of a sudden stopped or furloughed or changed very abruptly as soon as the pandemic struck. So women were massively, disproportionately impacted by this, laid off. The numbers are in the book, but the numbers are, of course, in the millions of women who were suddenly laid off. And the other thing the experts told me is that, you know, when it came to what we were talking about, distance learning and all that, it's the woman in the household that took on the burden there, not only trying to maybe find a new career or uphold her career, but also take care of the kids and help them with learning. Because I'm told, if kids had to vote between mom and dad, they often vote for mom in terms of who's going to take up those roles. So that was very interesting to write about as well. But what basically happened, Joyce, is that the pandemic catapulted a lot of these technology trends 10 years or more ahead. So all of a sudden, we were using Zoom, we were using other tools that were kind of there in the background, but not really well known. And that's the really, really good side of tech. But yeah, you're right. The bad side, and I've been talking about this a lot in the past few weeks, is the massive, massive spread of disinformation. In other words, deliberate and false information spread, misinformation, fake news. I knew this was a phenomenon because, as I said, I've worked in the past in disease outbreaks, but it was really, something that affected our ability to bounce back, I think. And the other thing, of course, that was happening in the lead up to the pandemic is a lot of people were building up a mistrust of mainstream media. Again, I don't want to get into politics or name names, but there was a lot of mudslinging at mainstream media. And what was also happening is we had this siloing of journalism. So, you know, in the old days, you'd come home, sit down with mom and dad or whatever, and watch Walter Cronkite give the news, and everything he said was gospel. And those types of, Dan Rather, people like that, they set the agenda of what you think and what you talk about. But that has very, very, very much disintegrated because we're getting a lot more providers of information. It's not only the three networks anymore. I mean, then you have Politico, you have Bloomberg, you have CNN, you have all these other, but then you have these very, very small newsletters, organizations that call them media outlets, and people who have podcasts, vodcasts. So there's so much being thrown at us. And I think what's tending to happen now is people tend to gravitate towards sources of information that they feel comfortable with. So that created the term echo chambers, where people go, something is said, and then it's echoed, and they're not really going to alternative sources of information. They're not really fact checking, and that's a big problem. Again, and then there's also social media, right? I mean, we get so much coming through on social media. Now, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world will tell you, oh, we have, armies of fact checkers. We have algorithms that, take people off who spread fake news and all that. But, they may delete millions of posts, but there's still millions still up there, or millions being produced, because governments like in Russia, for example, spend millions and millions of dollars to spread fake news, for example, discredit Western vaccines. Now, one last point on this. Look, Western nations cannot bathe themselves in glory either. There was recently a study done, I think, with the help of the Atlantic Council, that showed that among the big powers behind the spread of disinformation in the pandemic was Russia, China, no big surprise there, Iran, but also the United States, because they wanted to change the narrative in their favor on this pandemic and on vaccines. So anyway, the bottom line, I think for a lot of us is, my advice would be, just fact check your information, try to take the time to go to alternative sources. And there's a lot of resources online. And one of the ones I'll put out there, it's by a friend of mine, Diana Graber. She's a California educator. It's called Cyber Civics. I think the website is cybercivics.org or .com. And they're in about 50 US states right now. And they help students and parents and teachers become more media literate. So how to fact check. One last thing is, and this is really nobody's fault, but the other thing that's happening is our attention spans are really, really shrinking big time. So as much as I and others like to evangelize about the need to check sources and, Google this, Google that, is, let's face it, technology and smartphones have really impacted us, I think, in terms of our ability to focus. Trust me, even myself, the temptation to pick up this thing up and look at it while you're in the midst of something is huge. And finally, I think also, the research on the pandemic is so young, is that I think the pandemic, whether it's the lockdown, whether it's the impact of the anxiety that we have, our feeling of vulnerability, I think that's also impacted it has definitely impacted upon our mental health, but I think it's also impacted upon our ability to focus and concentrate. I've talked to a lot of people about this. Again, it's still an area that needs to be researched more, but that's not a good thing, because we already had this problem beforehand, and now I think it's just added to it.
Wow, that is so true, because I know we had talked a little bit about just having the ability to focus. It's so hard to focus already, and then now with all these different things going on. And one of the things, what do you think? Do you think there's going to be a huge effect on our kids when it comes to focus and all this technology? Because right now my kids are small and they set up their own Zoom meetings and they can talk to their friends and they just ask, can I set up a Zoom? And, so those are things that within the last year, I discovered my kids can do all these amazing things on technology that I didn't know. But I'm wondering, how is it going to affect them, in the long run?
Well, yeah, again, going back to that subtitle, from bad to good or from good to bad, like anything, there's good and bad aspects to this. I'm told, I remember researching this even for Digital Crack, is that the ability to go online. For example, if you are feeling vulnerable, if you need interventions or assistance, our ability to reach out and find support groups, for example, on Facebook and elsewhere on mental health, is really, really robust now. There's a lot of resources out there. There are a lot of groups you can join. And also, your kids going on Zoom, well, there's a good and bad to that. I mean, on the one hand, their ability to reach out and to make friends with people on the other side of the planet, to learn from others is huge. And it maybe even it enables them to help other peers, other students of their age in underdeveloped countries to get assistance. But on the other hand, it also opens up a lot of children to bullying. It opens them up to feeling inadequate. I think it's in the book. I cited one rapper, I think it was, who said, the average kid in North America wakes up in the morning, and by the time he or she gets out of bed, they compared themselves to 100 other people because they're scrolling through Instagram, things like that. The other thing that's been happening, and it's partially, assisted by technology, is that the stigma associated with coming out and saying, look, I'm having problems. I'm depressed. I've considered offing myself or whatever, whether you're a CEO or whether you're just, a normal person, that barrier has come down. And that's a very, very good thing. Because this is a very, very worrying prediction. The head of WHO, Dr. Tedros, said a few weeks ago when I was on a press conference, I think it was in response to one of my questions, is that the mental health impact, the number of cases after this pandemic, will be greater than after the world wars. That's a chilling statement to make. But talking to people, even anecdotally, I tend to agree with that. The problem is that a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of governments, a lot of companies, a lot of institutions have not put the resources there to help people. There was an item on PBS, the NewsHour last night, focusing on university colleges in the US, and they've realized that this is a huge problem. I think I saw a startling statistic that one in four college students have considered suicide. That's huge. So yeah, the problems were there before, of course, but the problems are even bigger now. So this needs to be dealt with, because I'm hearing a lot of stories about people either losing it, or the other thing I'm hearing, and again, I have to preface this with the research is still very young, is that, for example, when it comes to something a lot of us love, which is travel, a lot of people are actually afraid to almost leave their home or leave their city and board an airplane. And that is why the industry is struggling. A big reason why the industry is struggling so much is people have this anxiety. One last thing, and this is me talking to mental health experts, is that the big problem we face right now is we can't see an end to this pandemic. Oftentimes when there is some event, natural disaster, things like that, we know we will build back. We know the storm will end, something like that. But this pandemic, as I said earlier, seems to have no end. It seems to outsmart us at every corner. So that's something that I think public officials need to address a lot more in order to get a lot of us around this. Yeah.
Wow. And when you just mentioned on travel, one of the anxieties, like especially for women, especially for parents, is traveling with children. And then maybe your child cannot stay with a mask the whole time. And then we've seen all these different things on social media where when your child could not stay with their mask the whole time, it became such a big deal and all that. And I think that has been my greatest fear. So sometimes I'm like, you know what, let's just travel. Let's just go out of town. I'll drive,
Sure. A quick point on that. So it's very interesting what the research told us beforehand is that, again, there's a good and a bad, right? But okay, let me start with the good. I've talked to, for example, I think it was Diana Graber, who I mentioned earlier, of Cyber Civics, and she kind of agrees is that with the amount of time the kids have been spending on their screens or on Zoom, is that maybe now they'll be much more inclined to put the phone down or turn the screen off or leave that game alone, go outside and play with their friends. Because a lot of the participation, we call it athletic activities of kids, was really dropping because of technology. But on the other side, I've resumed travel because I've had to, and I do observe a lot. And yeah, you do see the difficulty parents have on airplanes, especially long haul flights. Not only are they covered, but their kids are covered. And the research I did for Digital Crack showed that kids as young as 2 or 3 years old were using smartphones, and that they were shown after some time to have problems not only concentrating, but also they showed less empathy. But the very interesting thing is they had problems reading their parents' expressions. So, this, you're a mom, if you're upset with your kid, your face shows it, right? And they get the message. But I was looking recently on recent flights, and that real estate that gives a lot of that expression away is now covered. So how are kids supposed to read their parents' faces when that much is covered? Again, there's very, very little research, I'm sure, on this at the moment, but it's something that's going to have to be looked at. And to me, this represents just another level of difficulty for the parent, for the caregiver, when you have that barrier between you. I do go into the book a little bit about online dating, for example, and I posed the question is, how long can people go? How many months can they go just interacting, like, for example, we are on Zoom on screen without actually meeting? And I did hear examples of people breaking lockdown and sneaking out and meeting with someone they've been communicating with because they just can't stand it anymore, and I don't blame them. But some reports say online dating services just went through the roof during the pandemic. But on the other hand, I do wonder how long people can go without that physical contact, without meeting. So that will be something interesting to look at as well.
Wow. I never even thought of that. So that is really interesting to look at. But wow, this has been so awesome. We are actually running out of time. So if you could just give us your final remarks regarding your book, and then also where people can be able to get it.
Well, first of all, yeah, thank you for the promotion of the book. So the website is digitalpandemicbook.com. So just put book under here and add .com, and you'll be taken to the website. And if you have just very little time, or you're sick and tired of looking at a screen, there are a couple of things there that I'm actually very proud of. One is the book trailer. It's about 8 minutes long, but it gives you a very good idea. It brings to life some of the voices in the book. Their audio is there, and I think that'll be very interesting. And then the other thing is, I do read the forward chapter. There's a link there. You just click on the audio, put on your earphones, and you'll hear me. And that's the other thing I wanted to say. There's now the audio book out. It's available on Amazon and Audible, and in December it'll be available on the site of the publisher Blackstone. But there you can download the entire book, and I actually voiced the book. I did it from where I'm sitting right now, night after night after night, earlier this year. Fortunately, I live in a very peaceful part of the world, and I got away with it. But that's for a lot of people who are tired, again, of reading a digital version or the paper copy that is there. And also, I was in the great city of Houston, thanks to a previous guest of yours, Chef Jenny, right? So I did a book talk there, and there was a lot of interest. Well, I did not a book talk, but a bit of a speech, but I sold my books there. So I'm going around different cities doing book talks, and then the book is on sale there. And also it is on sale on Amazon and a growing list of bookstores in the US, Canada, and elsewhere. So by buying the book, not only are you buying something which I think will help you, because at the end, there are 20 some future gazing predictions of what the new normal will be like in various different areas. So to me, I'm hoping that will be kind of a helpful guide for people of where we're going to go once the pandemic settles down a bit. But also by buying the book, you're helping my project and my work as well. people have told me this before, but one of the most difficult things in life is to actually write a book. But as soon as you finish writing, guess what? Some of our mutual friends know this. They've just published that you have to go out and sell it. So one of my friends said, okay, Michael, you have to stop being the dilettante literary guy, and now you're going to become the hard-nosed business person. So that's been a learning process as well, is to, when you're self-publishing, to get the book out. But on a final note, I have to thank everyone, including you, who have been there for me and have helped promote the book. I know you've read it and who you've said good things about it. So I'm very, very grateful. And there is another book idea percolating in my head. I'm not going to give it away, but stay tuned. And finally, my own website is michaelbociurkiw.com. A lot of what I do, a lot of what I write is there. So again, thank you very much for your support. And going back to what I said at the beginning is this is a very, very tough time for all of us, no matter how strong you are. I end this kind of at the end of my podcast and vodcast, Global Impact, as well, as I say, not only stay safe, but look, we have the technology, a lot of it is free, to reach out and touch somebody. So even if you only have a few seconds or a few minutes, use that technology to reach out to somebody you haven't heard from for quite some time, because chances are is they're really struggling. They may not admit it, but you could make a huge difference in their lives by just doing that simple act.
Wow, thank you so much. That is so wonderful. And just one last thing, could you just give us your social media platform? Because I know most people would want to follow you on social media.
Sure. So on Twitter, it's World Affairs Pro, one word. And on Instagram, where a lot of us are posting more these days, Michael_Bociurkiw, and it's BOCIURKIW. And I'm here and there as well, but I tend to post links to my posts. And then also you can Google Global Impact. That is the podcast and vodcast I do with my co-host Melissa Ritchie. You can Google her as well. And there you'll find the videos from our recent podcast. And in fact, just recently we interviewed a few people who do talk about technology and mental health and things like vaccination as well. So a lot of information there to help power you through this.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. That was awesome. Great information. I know people love it. And then of course, guys, if you're not already following us on the Breaking Limitations page, make sure you follow us on the page, on the Instagram page, and also on our YouTube, and you will not be disappointed. So Michael, thank you so much for just gracing us with your presence, giving us all this amazing information, and we will definitely be using it. And also I know more people will be getting the book. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. God bless.
What limitation are you holding on to? The Breaking Limitations Mindset Journal has 63 daily quotes and scriptures that will help you break every limitation in your life. Get your copy today. Represent your commitment to breaking limitations by visiting breakinglimitationsnow.com to purchase your Breaking Limitations t-shirt, tank top, or hoodie today.